The year was 1963. A homeowner in the Cappadocia region of Turkey decided to renovate his basement. Nothing unusual about that. People renovate basements all the time. He grabbed a sledgehammer and swung at what he thought was just another interior wall. The wall crumbled. Behind it, darkness opened up like a mouth. He expected to find perhaps a small cavity, maybe some old foundation work from whoever built the house before him. Instead, his flashlight beam disappeared into a chamber. Then beyond that chamber, another space. And beyond that, a corridor carved from volcanic stone, angling downward into the earth. He could have stopped there, could have called it interesting, maybe bricked it back up, continued with his renovation. But curiosity is a powerful thing. He followed that corridor down. What he'd stumbled into would change our understanding of what ancient civilizations were capable of and what they were terrified of. That first tunnel led to a room. That room connected to others. Those rooms opened onto passages that twisted deeper and deeper into the bedrock. When archaeologists finally arrived to map what this man had discovered, they found themselves standing at the entrance to something that shouldn't exist. Derinkuyu. The name means deep well in Turkish, and it's almost absurdly understated for what the place actually is. Imagine a skyscraper. Now flip it upside down and bury it in solid rock. That's the scale we're talking about. The complex descends approximately 280 feet into the earth, deeper than the Statue of Liberty is tall, all carved downward instead of built upward. But it's not just depth that staggers the mind. It's the complexity. 18 distinct levels, each one a maze of rooms, hallways, and chambers. Thousands of individual spaces connected by miles of passages. Ventilation shafts plunging straight down like ancient elevators. Wells tapping into underground aquifers. Storage vaults. Living quarters. Kitchens. Worship spaces. Even schools. And here's the detail that makes you stop and reconsider everything. This underground city could hold up to 20,000 people. Not for a night or a week. For months. Possibly years. Someone built this. Not yesterday. Not recently. The oldest sections are at least 2,800 years old. Some researchers argue for dates pushing back even further, into the mists of prehistory where records fade and only stone remembers. But age and size are just numbers. They don't capture what Derinkuyu really represents. To understand that, you have to ask the only question that matters. Why? Why would anyone undertake such an impossible task? Why hollow out an entire mountain from the inside? Why create a shadow city in the depths where the sun never reaches? What were they hiding from? The conventional answer is simple: invaders, armies, human enemies with swords and torches. Cappadocia sits at a crossroads of ancient empires: Hittites, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Mongols. Wave after wave of conquest washing over the land for millennia. But that answer feels incomplete when you stand in those passages. When you see the engineering. When you understand the commitment required to create something like this. This isn't a bunker thrown together in panic. This is multigenerational architecture. This is planning for a threat that doesn't just visit once and leave. This is preparation for something that comes back, again and again, something so reliable in its menace that you're willing to spend centuries perfecting your escape. And Derinkuyu isn't alone. Archaeologists have found dozens of underground cities in Cappadocia, hundreds of smaller complexes. Some of these subterranean fortresses connect to each other through tunnels that stretch for miles beneath the Earth's surface. You could travel from one city to another without ever seeing daylight. An entire civilization developed the infrastructure to vanish underground. Not individuals, not families. Whole communities with systems and protocols and architectural knowledge passed down through generations. That's not fear. That's memory. Cultural memory of something so terrible that the response became permanent. Built into stone. Built into identity. Let's talk about what it takes to create something like this. Not just the why, but the how. Because understanding the engineering helps us understand the desperation or the determination behind it. Building downward is fundamentally different from building upward. When you construct a tower, gravity is your enemy, but at least you can see what you're doing. You have sunlight. You have space to maneuver. Materials can be hoisted up on ropes and pulleys. Carving a city into solid rock inverts every advantage. Gravity becomes a problem in new ways. You're working in darkness. Space is limited. And every single cubic foot of stone you remove has to go somewhere. The rock at Derinkuyu is tough, compressed volcanic ash from eruptions millions of years ago. This gives you both good news and bad news. The good news, when freshly exposed, tough is relatively soft. You can carve it with hand tools. The bad news, it's still rock. You're still removing it chip by chip, swing by swing, with bronze and iron implements. Let's understand the scale. The complex covers roughly 4 square miles of underground space. Conservative estimates put the total volume of removed stone at approximately 2.5 million cubic feet. 2.5 million cubic feet of rock, removed by hand. Where did it go? That's not a rhetorical question. That much stone should leave evidence. Massive debris piles, ancient quarries, some trace of disposal. But there's nothing. No significant deposits of tuff anywhere near the city. The stones simply vanished. Either they transported it miles away, which seems impossible given the labor and time involved, or they ground it to dust and scattered it across the landscape. Both options defy easy explanation. And they didn't just dig. They carved. Every room features smooth walls and curved ceilings. Decorative columns support nothing but showcase the skill of ancient artisans. Staircases are cut directly into the stone. Passages flow with intentional design, not random excavation. This is sculpture on an architectural scale, and they did all of it in near total darkness. Think about that for a moment. You're 200 feet below the surface. The only light comes from oil lamps or torches. The smoke from your light source fills the chamber, scratching your throat, burning your eyes. The air is thick and stale. And in these conditions, you're expected to create precise architectural features in unyielding stone. The ventilation system alone qualifies as a miracle of ancient engineering. 52 ventilation shafts run from the surface down to the deepest levels. Some plunge more than 180 feet, perfectly vertical, perfectly straight, roughly 3 feet in diameter. How do you excavate a shaft that drops 180 feet straight down through solid rock with primitive tools? You can't start at the bottom and dig up. You must begin at the surface and work your way down. But that creates immediate problems. As you dig deeper, how do you remove the debris? How do you get fresh tools to workers at the bottom of an ever-deepening shaft? How do you prevent the shaft from collapsing as it extends downward into the unknown? And here's the critical detail. These ventilation shafts had to be completed before the city could be inhabited. Without air circulation, thousands of people in sealed chambers would suffocate within hours. So the first builders faced the ultimate engineering challenge. Dig vertical shafts hundreds of feet deep with no guarantee the system would work, no way to test it until completion. They were drilling blind into the earth, hoping their calculations were correct. The water system adds another layer of impossibility. Wells throughout Derinkuyu tap into underground aquifers. Some wells descend more than 180 feet, narrow shafts about 2 feet wide, bored straight down until they strike water. But here's what should be impossible. The wells are positioned perfectly. They hit water at different depths, suggesting whoever designed the city understood the geology. They knew where the aquifers were located. They knew precisely how deep to dig. There's no room for trial and error here. You can't dig a 180-foot test well, miss the aquifer by 10 feet, and casually try again. Every well had to succeed on the first attempt. The planning had to be flawless. Think about the knowledge that requires. Understanding groundwater flow, calculating depth and position, coordinating well placement with the overall city design. This isn't primitive technology. This is sophisticated engineering executed with simple tools. Walk through Derinkuyu today, and one feature dominates your attention. The doors. Massive circular stone wheels, some 5 feet in diameter, weighing between 400 and 1,000 pounds. They roll on tracks carved into the floor. When closed, they seal passages completely. These aren't decorative. They aren't symbolic. These doors were designed to be used. Each level of the city has multiple doors, perhaps 20 per level. That means hundreds of these enormous stone wheels positioned throughout the complex. Carving them was only the first challenge. They had to be perfectly circular, perfectly balanced. The tracks had to be perfectly level. The engineering tolerances had to be precise enough that a half-ton stone could roll smoothly despite its weight. All of this carved and installed hundreds of feet underground by lamplight. But the most telling detail isn't the engineering. It's the design. These doors lock only from the inside. There's a hole in the center of each door, about 6 inches across. You can insert a pole through this hole and roll the door closed from inside the chamber. But once closed, there's no external handle, no mechanism, no way to grip the stone from the outside. If you're in the tunnel when the door seals, you're trapped. You're not getting through. This reveals something crucial about the purpose of Derinkuyu. The city wasn't designed as a fortress you could sally forth from. It wasn't a military stronghold for launching counterattacks. It was a hiding place, a sealed refuge you enter and lock behind you, hoping whatever threat exists outside eventually abandons the search and moves on. The doors are positioned strategically. The first one sits roughly 50 feet from the main entrance, close enough for rapid retreat. Then another door 100 feet deeper. Then another. 7 major doors separate the surface from the lowest levels. Each door buys time. Each one creates a barrier. And the doors on the deeper levels are different from those near the surface. Heavier, thicker, more carefully constructed, as if the builders expected that anything getting past the first barriers would need increasingly stronger defenses to stop. Some doors have additional features. Stone bars that drop into place. Secondary locks. Reinforcement channels. These aren't just rolled shut. They're secured, barricaded, made permanent. Why such extreme measures? If you're hiding from an army, this seems excessive. Armies don't have the time or resources to chip through stone doors. They move on to easier targets. But if you're hiding from something with patience, something that might wait, then every extra barrier becomes essential. The doors show wear patterns, grooves in the tracks, polished stone from repeated movement. These defenses weren't theoretical. They were used, many times over many years. The threat came back regularly enough that the mechanisms needed to stay functional. After thousands of years, archaeologists tested one of the doors. It still rolled. The engineering still worked. But here's what haunts me about these doors. They don't just keep things out. They seal you in. Once closed, you're committed. You're underground, cut off from fresh air, sunlight, the outside world. You're betting your life that whatever is happening above ground is worse than entombing yourself in stone. What has to be happening on the surface to make that the better option? Small chambers sit next to some doors, guard posts. Someone would sit there, watching, waiting, ready to defend if something tried to breach the barrier. These chambers have carved benches, alcoves for oil lamps, weapon racks cut into the walls. This wasn't temporary duty. This was someone stationed, possibly for days at a time, sitting in darkness, watching a sealed stone door, waiting for, what exactly? What tries to break through 1,000 pounds of rock? Some doors show damage on the exterior surface. Scratches, marks that look almost like something clawed at the stone. Erosion, probably. Water damage. But when you see them by lamplight in those narrow passages, they don't look like nothing. The doors remain functional today. If some threat emerged tomorrow, you could roll those doors closed. The city would work. The defenses would hold. That's what disturbs me most. Not that ancient people built this, but that it still works. That the threat they prepared for might still be relevant. That these doors might still be needed. The passages between levels aren't designed for comfort or efficiency. They're designed to kill anyone who doesn't belong there. Most tunnels at Derinkuyu measure about 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide. You can't stand upright. You must crouch, bend forward, sometimes move sideways. Your shoulders scrape the walls. This isn't accidental. This is tactical design. A single defender can control a narrow passage. One person with a spear commands the entire space. Attackers can't spread out, can't use superior numbers, can't overwhelm through force. They must come one at a time, and each one becomes vulnerable. The ceiling height changes constantly. You're hunched over. Then suddenly the ceiling drops, and you're crawling. Then it rises. Then drops again. When you're on hands and knees, you can't fight. Your weapon is useless. Your head is down. Someone waiting around the corner has every advantage. The passages twist, sharp turns every 20 or 30 feet. You can't see ahead. Can't build momentum. Can't charge forward. Every corner could hide an ambush. Alcoves are cut into the walls. Small spaces just large enough for one person to stand. These aren't decorative niches. They're fighting positions. Someone hides in the alcove. You walk past. They step out behind you. You never knew they were there. The floors slope, sometimes upward, sometimes downward, never flat for long. This exhausts invaders, throws off balance, forces attention downward instead of ahead. When you're tired and off balance, You make mistakes. Mistakes are fatal underground. Steps are carved directly into the rock, but they're irregular. Different heights, different depths. You can't find a rhythm, can't move quickly. You watch your feet. And while watching your feet, you're not watching for the spear thrust coming from the shadows. Ventilation shafts create additional hazards. They run vertically through multiple levels, about 2 feet wide. Defenders can drop things down these shafts. Rocks, boiling water, hot oil. The shaft carries the projectile straight to the level below. Anyone underneath gets hit with no warning, no way to defend. Murder holes perforate some ceilings. Small openings just large enough for a spear thrust. You're walking along a passage. Someone above you drives a spear down through the ceiling. You never saw them, never had a chance. Multiple routes connect different levels, but they're not equal. Some passages are obvious, wide, seemingly well-traveled. These are traps. The real defenders use narrow passages, hidden routes, tunnels that twist nonsensically. They know the maze. You don't. Dead ends exist throughout the complex. Passages that look promising but terminate in blank walls. You follow the tunnel, thinking you're making progress. Then nothing. Now you have to backtrack, confused and frustrated. And while you're retracing your steps, someone is waiting. Sound behaves strangely underground. Echoes bounce off stone walls. You hear footsteps but can't determine direction. Ahead, behind, above, below. The acoustics are disorienting. You jump at shadows. Swing at nothing. Waste energy fighting phantoms. Temperature shifts between levels. Some areas are warm, others cold. The changes affect breathing, stamina, judgment. You're sweating in one passage, shivering in the next. Your body can't regulate, can't adapt. Water appears unexpectedly. Puddles on floors. Dripping from ceilings. Not accidental drainage. These are designed obstacles. Water makes footing treacherous. You're already hunched in a narrow passage. Now you're trying not to slip, not to fall. Falling means dying. The stone doors divide the city into zones of varying sizes. Defenders can retreat through small zones quickly, sealing doors behind them, moving to the next level. Attackers get trapped in large zones, wandering, searching, finding nothing. There are false doors. Stone wheels carved into walls that look like functioning barriers but go nowhere. You waste time trying to open them. Waste energy. Waste hope. Meanwhile, the real door is somewhere else, already closed. The deepest levels feature the worst passages. Narrower, lower, more twisted. By the time you fight down that far, you're exhausted. You've been underground for hours, maybe days. Supplies running low, air running thin, fading, and the passages keep getting harder. Some tunnels have deliberately weakened ceilings. Defenders can collapse these passages, bury attackers alive, or simply block routes and force you deeper into the maze. Chapel levels have strange acoustics. Sound carries in ways that make you think there are more defenders than there actually are. You hear voices everywhere. You panic, and panic kills you underground. Schoolrooms contain low stone benches and desks. These become obstacles during combat. You trip over them in darkness. They slow you down. Defenders know where every bench sits. You don't. Storage rooms filled with clay jars and grain sacks create visual barriers. You can't see through them, can't move through them quickly. Defenders hide behind storage, attack, disappear. Animal pens add confusion. Some levels house livestock, sheep, goats, chickens. The animals make noise, create movement. You think you see something. It's just a sheep. You relax. Then the spear comes. There's no viable way to attack this place. You can't siege it. Water comes from deep underground. Food is stored inside. You can't smoke them out. The ventilation is too efficient. You can't flood it. Drainage channels prevent that. You can't dig around it. The rock is too hard. The city too vast. Your only option is to fight through it. Level by level. Passage by passage. Door by door. And each level costs you. Costs men. Costs time. Costs morale. By the third level, soldiers don't want to go deeper. By the fifth, they're refusing orders. By the seventh, you've lost. This is defensive architecture at its peak. Not walls. Not moats. Not towers. This is weaponizing the earth itself. Using darkness. Using confusion. Using fear. Someone understood warfare perfectly. Understood how to make every passage a trap, every corner an ambush, every level a killing ground. They didn't just build a hiding place. They built an underground fortress designed to bleed attackers dry. The passages prove it. Every narrow tunnel, every low ceiling, every twisted turn says the same thing. You are not welcome here. You are not safe here. This place will kill you if you don't belong. And it would. Even today, the architecture doesn't care what century it is. The tactics still work. The traps still function. The maze still confuses. The darkness still frightens. They built something timeless. Something that would protect their descendants forever. Focus on stone and engineering obscures something essential. People actually lived here. Not just builders or soldiers. Families. Children. Elderly. Entire communities spending months underground. That does something to the human mind. Humans need light. Our biology follows the rhythm of day and night. It regulates sleep, mood, mental health. Down in Derinkuyu, natural sunlight never reached the living areas. Only the uppermost levels received a hint of daylight. Everything else existed in absolute darkness unless illuminated by torches or oil lamps. The air was perpetually thick with smoke. Shadows danced on walls. Faces flickered in and out of visibility. After days or weeks, time becomes meaningless. Your circadian rhythm drifts. Your sense of temporal orientation collapses. Psychologists call this cave syndrome. Extended isolation from the external world produces confusion, disorientation, depression, exhaustion. Modern miners with electric lights and fresh air ventilation still struggle with it. In Derinkuyu, there was no electricity. Just fire. Just darkness. Just the slow erosion of time's meaning. People must have invented alternative timekeeping methods. Meals. Prayers. Listening for sounds from above. Storms. Footsteps. Thunder. But most of the surface world was unreachable. You wouldn't know if outside was peaceful or burning in war. Evidence suggests people tried maintaining normalcy. Schoolrooms with benches. Chapels for worship. Storage for provisions. Pens for animals. They carved spaces that resembled home. But nothing truly replaces the sky. You can't manufacture sunlight. You can't fake fresh air. The body knows. The mind knows. Consider what happens in confined spaces. A French researcher named Michel Siffry spent months in a cave during the 1960s, isolated from time cues. Within weeks, his temporal sense disintegrated. He slept at random intervals. Ate whenever hungry. His concept of day and night collapsed. He grew lonely. His mind played tricks. He hallucinated. That was one man in the modern era with support systems. Now multiply that by thousands of people. Parents trying to keep children calm. Elderly missing sunlight. Young people desperate to run. All trapped in a maze beneath the earth, listening for signs they could return to the surface. Think about the noise. The city must have been loud. Footsteps. Voices. Children crying. Animals bleating. Every sound echoing off stone. No soft furniture to absorb noise. No grass. No trees. Just hard walls and hard floors. Everything amplified. Every argument. Every laugh. Every sigh. Some would adapt. Others would break under the pressure. And the smell. Hundreds or thousands of people in close quarters. Cooking over open flames. Storing food. Keeping animals. No matter how sophisticated the ventilation, it's never going to smell fresh. You'd become accustomed to sweat, smoke, damp earth, and the accumulated odors of dense human habitation. Then there's the fear. People didn't come here for vacation. They came because of danger. Every day you'd listen for footsteps above. Every night you'd wonder if someone was trying to break in. Children would ask questions. Parents would either fabricate stories or speak truth. Either way, stress permeated everything. Imagine the rush when the city filled. Hundreds of people crowding entrances. Giant stone doors rolling shut. Families separated in chaos. People shouting, trying to locate children or parents. Once the doors closed, the outside world vanished. You were alone with whoever made it inside. Health deteriorates underground. Without sunlight, people can't synthesize vitamin D. That leads to weak bones, muscle pain, chronic fatigue. Children are most vulnerable. Growing bodies need sunlight. Without it, they sicken. Skin pales. Eyes struggle to adjust. Wounds heal slowly in darkness and dampness. There's minimal space for exercise. No fields to run through. No room to stretch. Just narrow passages and crowded chambers. People would grow stiff. Muscles would atrophy. Even standing upright was difficult in low tunnels. Food presents another challenge. Storage rooms held grain, dried fruit, perhaps salted meat. But fresh food would vanish quickly. No gardens underground. No hunting. No foraging. After a while, meals would turn bland and insufficient. Hunger grows. Tempers shorten. Arguments multiply. It's a pattern visible in every siege, every famine, every disaster throughout history. Water, though brilliantly engineered, wasn't unlimited. If too many people crowded in, supplies might dwindle. Equipment might fail. One dropped torch could start a fire. Disasters could strike in moments, and fixing them wasn't easy. Disease spreads rapidly in crowded conditions. One cough, and dozens fall ill. Underground, there's no sunlight to kill bacteria. No wind to carry away contamination. Simple illnesses could turn lethal. Mental health deteriorates. Cabin fever, that restless, trapped feeling after days of confinement. It transforms into anger, sadness, numbness. People snap at each other. Minor issues become major conflicts. Some retreat into silence. Others attempt to seize control. It's a test of patience and leadership. Historical records from sieges describe people turning against each other. Neighbors stealing food. Friends becoming enemies. Trust disintegrates. Even in recent times, people trapped in mines or bunkers report identical patterns. The longer the confinement, the harder hope becomes to maintain. Children don't understand why they can't go outside. Some grow scared. Others grow bored. Parents distract them with games or lessons. The schoolrooms found in Derinkuyu show people tried maintaining education. Perhaps they sang songs or told stories by lamplight. Perhaps they promised better days ahead. For the elderly, the stress was even more severe. Old bones aren't designed for crouching or crawling. Weak lungs don't handle smoke well. Fears about family and future must have weighed heavily. Some likely never returned to the surface. Nobody knew how long they'd be underground. Days, weeks, months. Each hour stretched endlessly. Every sound could signal hope or danger. People watched for any indication it was safe to ascend. Sometimes rumors would sweep through. The enemy is gone. It's safe now. Maybe people rushed to the doors. Maybe they waited, fearing deception. Archaeologists believe people might have lived in Derinkuyu for months at a time during extended crises. That means they adapted somehow, learned to live with fear, created routines, convinced themselves it would end. Evidence of daily life appears in small details. Carvings on walls, simple patterns, marks left behind. Perhaps counting days. Perhaps prayers or protective symbols. People left their mark even in darkness. Some rooms have niches for lamps along the walls. That suggests people spent long evenings together, sharing light, possibly sharing stories. Chapels probably hosted crowded prayers. In schoolrooms, teachers scratched lessons on stone while children practiced just to stay occupied. Animal pens show people brought goats, sheep, possibly chickens. Animal sounds would have been comforting, reminders of the surface world. But also more mouths to feed. More noise. More mess. What would it feel like waking in complete darkness? No sunlight. No birds. Just water dripping and feet shuffling. You sit up, uncertain of the time. Someone nearby snores. A child cries. You light a lamp. The flame is tiny, barely pushing back the night. That's your world. Day after day, people did what was necessary. Worked together. Shared food. Shared chores. Sometimes that brought them closer. Other days, it drove them apart. Privacy was a fantasy. Nobody could be alone for long. When crises passed, they returned to the surface. Some things must have felt new all over again. Sun too bright. Wind too sharp. World too open. Maybe they blinked and laughed. Maybe they cried from relief. But the memory of darkness stayed with them. There's something in us that remembers old fears. Fear of darkness. Fear of being hunted. Fear of entrapment. Derinkuyu is proof. People carved an entire city into earth just to feel safe. They surrendered the sky for security. Gave up comfort for survival. It makes you wonder what frightened them so deeply. What danger was so immense that people chose darkness over daylight? Why were they willing to trade freedom for safety, even temporarily? Some say humans can adapt to anything. Derinkuyu tests that idea. People adapted to the maze, the darkness, the fear. They found ways to persevere, to keep families together, to maintain hope. But scars must have remained. Children who grew up in darkness. Parents who worried every night. Friends lost or left behind. After each crisis, life continued. But the memory of the underground lingered. The human cost is written in every stone, every scraped wall, every echo. This wasn't just architecture. It was survival paid for in days of darkness and years of memory. When you try to imagine ancient people in hiding, the mind naturally turns to war. Soldiers, armies, raiders on horseback. But there's another possibility, one much larger and more terrifying. What if it wasn't just people they were hiding from? What if it was the environment itself turning hostile? This isn't about kings or empires. It's about the world itself becoming an enemy. We know Earth's climate has changed many times. Not just ice ages, but sudden, violent shifts. Sometimes gradual, sometimes catastrophically fast. Volcanoes erupt. Ash clouds block the sun. Crops fail. People panic. It's happened before. It will happen again. Imagine you're living in ancient Cappadocia. The weather turns strange. Summer arrives cold. The sky darkens even at noon. Crops don't grow properly. Birds vanish. Rivers dry up or flood unpredictably. You look up, but the sun is just a pale disk behind gray haze. Day after day, conditions worsen. Some researchers believe Derinkuyu and similar cities weren't built only for war. They might have been last defenses against the sky itself, against disasters large enough to devastate entire regions. Not just armies with swords, but months or years of darkness, starvation, and atmospheric catastrophe. The science supports this. Around the world, there are layers of ash and dust in the geological record. Archaeologists find them in places they shouldn't exist. In Cappadocia, in Italy, in China, these layers tell stories. Sometimes the story is a volcano. Other times, massive dust storms or climate patterns that bring drought for years. Consider Mount Tambora's eruption in 1815. The volcano exploded in Indonesia. Ash circled the globe. In 1816, people called it the year without a summer. Snow fell in June in America. Crops froze in July. People starved. Weather was broken everywhere. Go back further. There's evidence of ancient eruptions and climate disasters in Turkey. Around 3,600 years ago, the volcano on Thera, modern Santorini, exploded. The detonation was massive. Ash spread across the Mediterranean into Turkey, Egypt, and beyond. Scientists found layers of this ash where people lived. After the eruption, weather changed for years. Crops failed. People abandoned homes. Societies collapsed. So here's the theory. When the sky turns dark and the world freezes, life above ground becomes impossible. Crops won't grow. Animals die. People grow desperate. In those moments, an underground city isn't just clever, it's life or death. It's not only volcanoes. Sometimes the problem is drought lasting decades. Sometimes flooding. Sometimes sudden freezing winters. Ancient records from China, Egypt, and Mesopotamia describe times when weather changed overnight. Black rain, red skies, winters that never ended. These aren't myths. Scientists found evidence. Tree rings, ice cores, mud layers showing sudden, sharp climate changes extending thousands of years into the past. Imagine you're a farmer in ancient Turkey. You wake one morning and the air smells wrong. The sun is orange, not yellow. Wind is cold despite the season. You check your fields. The wheat is stunted. Animals are restless. No birds singing. Every day, things worsen. You pray for rain, but nothing happens. Or perhaps it rains too much and rivers turn to mud. Either way, you're trapped. Word spreads. People in neighboring villages are leaving. Stories about rivers vanishing, forests burning, sky raining ash. You don't know what's true. All you know is the world outside isn't safe anymore. This is where Derinkuyu makes new sense. If you can't trust the sky, you must look underground. Earth is stable. Temperature constant. Wind can't reach you. Ash can't fall on your head. If you store enough grain, you can wait out disaster. If you have a well, you drink clean water even if rivers are poisoned with ash or mud. People might have gone below not because of sword-wielding enemies, but because the world outside was dying. They brought animals, children, elderly, sealed the doors, waited. There's another piece to this puzzle. The middle of Derinkuyu contains storage rooms everywhere. Not just for food, for water, oil, tools. Space for animals. Facilities for making wine and pressing olives. This isn't just a hiding place. It's a survival bunker. A place to endure the apocalypse, whether that means war or weather. Around 1200 BCE, something called the Bronze Age collapse hit the eastern Mediterranean. Not one country, whole empires disintegrated. Hittites, Mycenaeans, Egyptians, cities burned, trade stopped, writing disappeared in some regions. For a long time, historians blamed war. But now scientists have found evidence of massive drought. Tree rings from ancient trees show years without rain. Pollen in soil shows fields turning to dust. The drought lasted decades. Food ran out. Societies broke down. People moved in enormous waves. Refugees flooded into new lands. Some fought. Some begged. Some vanished. In Egypt, records describe people from the sea arriving in boats, starving and desperate. Chaos everywhere. In this world, an underground city is more than clever. It's a lifeline. You can't farm, can't hunt, but if you have stored food and water, you might survive until the world recovers. Why not just move somewhere else? In a regional disaster, there's nowhere to go. Every village struggles. Every river is dry. If you leave, you risk dying on the road. If you stay, you can at least control your circumstances. Underground, you can ration food. Control who enters. Keep your family safe. Ancient stories from the Middle East, Greece, and India talk about times of darkness. Myths about the sun vanishing. Endless winter. Sky turning to stone. At first, these sound like fairy tales. But when aligned with science, they start looking like memories of climate disaster. In 536 CE, a mysterious fog covered Asia and Europe. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun gave its light without brightness, like the moon. It lasted over a year. Summer turned cold. Crops failed. People starved by thousands. Scientists now know this was probably caused by a massive volcanic eruption, possibly in Iceland or North America. Dust and ash circled Earth, blocking sunlight. It was the coldest decade in more than 2,000 years. People back then didn't know about volcanoes on the other side of the world. All they knew was the sun was gone and the world was broken. Some records describe people hiding wherever they could. Caves, cellars, anything to escape cold and darkness. Epidemics followed. Whole towns disappeared. Back to Derinkuyu. The city's design makes sense if you're planning for the worst. Air shafts aren't just for comfort. They're for survival when outside air is full of ash or smoke. Wells are deep, reaching water that can't be contaminated from above. Storage rooms are enormous, enough for a large group to wait out disaster. The tunnels connect to other underground cities miles away. You could move between cities without surfacing. If one ran low on food, perhaps you could trade with another. If fire or ash blocked an entrance, you could escape through a different city. Some researchers think underground cities started as small shelters, then grew with each disaster. Maybe the first level was just a cave. After the first catastrophe, they dug deeper. After the next, they added more rooms. Over generations, the city grew into the maze we see today. What about animals? Some say the pens were just for food, but others think they were for survival. Goats and sheep provide milk and meat, but also warmth. In a freezing world, animals kept underground would help everyone survive. Their breath warms air. Their bodies provide comfort. Disease spreads fast when weather is broken. Cold, hungry people sicken easily. Underground, you close doors and keep out strangers. You control who enters. You keep your group small, food clean, water safe. This theory doesn't have all answers. There's no ancient diary saying, "We built this because the sky turned black." But when you assemble the evidence, ash layers, stories, massive storage facilities, it starts fitting. People don't build giant underground cities for entertainment. They don't spend years digging because they're bored. It requires something enormous, something terrifying. If you were living then, you'd want to be ready for anything. War, plague, famine, fire, flood. But nothing is as frightening as the world itself turning against you. When the sun vanishes and crops die, all you have left is each other and whatever you've hidden in the darkness. There's something powerful about that. Something almost hopeful. People didn't surrender. They found ways to survive. They planned for the unthinkable. They carved out a future even when the world above was collapsing. And when the sky finally cleared, when the sun returned, they climbed from darkness and started again. Long before scientists tracked weather patterns or measured volcanic ash, people tried making sense of disasters in the only way they could, through stories. They didn't have meteorology textbooks. They didn't understand plate tectonics. All they had were narratives passed down through generations. And sometimes, stories are the only clues we get. What did ancient people say about the world turning against them? About darkness, cold, and hunger? They explained it through myths, legends, and sacred texts. In ancient Mesopotamia, where writing first appeared, people told tales of floods, storms, and darkness. The Epic of Gilgamesh, written over 4,000 years ago, describes a flood covering the entire world. The hero survives by building a boat. The details differ from the Noah story, but the core is identical. The world ends in water. Only a few survive. But it wasn't just floods. There are stories about darkness too. In Egypt, the Book of the Dead discusses nights lasting days. The sun god Ra battles through the underworld, fighting monsters to bring back dawn. Every morning, people hoped he'd win. Sometimes they wondered if he wouldn't. In Greece, the myth of Persephone tells of a woman taken into the underworld. While she's gone, the world freezes. Nothing grows. Earth itself mourns. Only when she returns does spring come back. This isn't merely a story about seasons. It's a memory of what happens when the world stops working. Go farther east, and you find similar themes. In India, the Mahabharata mentions times when the sun didn't rise or skies rained fire. In China, ancient poems describe heaven's anger, times when the sky turned red or black, when crops failed and people starved. Why do so many stories from different places describe the same things? Floods, darkness, endless winter, the sun vanishing, the world growing cold. Maybe they all independently invented similar tales. Or maybe people everywhere remembered real disasters, but explained them in the only way they could understand. Some researchers think these stories are memories of actual events. Volcanoes, dust storms, extended droughts. If you're living through chaos without understanding why, you search for answers. Sometimes the only answer is a story. The Epic of Gilgamesh comes from around 2100 BCE. In it, the gods decide to destroy humanity with a flood. Only one man, Utnapishtim, receives warning. He builds a boat, saves his family and animals, and survives when the world drowns. When waters recede, life begins again. This isn't just about water. It's about fear. Imagine your entire world washing away. Fields, villages, even the sun hidden by clouds. The only explanation that makes sense is that someone powerful, perhaps a god, must be angry. In Egypt, the Book of the Dead hints at real disasters. There's mention of darkness lasting so long people began to panic. The sun god Ra is attacked by a giant serpent called Apophis. Every night, Ra must fight this monster. If he loses, the sun won't rise. To ancient Egyptians, this wasn't bedtime entertainment. It was an explanation for why sometimes the sun seemed weak or why storms and darkness appeared without warning. Maybe after a major volcanic eruption, when ash covered the sky, people believed Apophis had won, that the world was ending. Greece gives us Persephone and Demeter. Demeter is the harvest goddess. Her daughter Persephone is kidnapped by Hades and taken underground. While Persephone is gone, nothing grows. Demeter grieves, and earth goes cold and dead. When Persephone returns, spring comes back. On the surface, it's about seasons. But think about what happens if winter lasts too long. If spring never arrives, crops fail, people starve. Suddenly the old stories feel very real. In India, the Mahabharata is filled with strange weather and disasters. Years without rain, dust storms blocking the sun, rivers running dry, sky turning red. Sometimes gods are blamed. Other times it's fate. But the message is consistent. The world can change in an instant. People need to be ready. Chinese historians kept detailed records. They wrote about years of darkness, red dust, black rain. Sometimes we can match these descriptions to real volcanic eruptions or droughts. What do all these stories share? They're not just about magic or gods. They're about survival. They're warnings. If the world can turn on you without warning, you need a way to survive. In the Bible, Noah's Ark is famous. God decides to flood the world. Noah builds a boat, saves his family and animals, waits for the flood to end. When it does, life starts again. It's almost identical to the Mesopotamian story. Two separate cultures. Same fear. Water can destroy everything. Why does this matter for Derinkuyu? Because the people who lived in Cappadocia wouldn't have had science to explain disasters. They would have had stories passed down from parents and grandparents. Stories about the sun vanishing, the world freezing, the ground becoming deadly. When things went wrong, People often thought it was punishment or fate. In Turkey, there are ancient legends about the sleeping earth. These stories describe times when the world above became deadly and only those who went below survived. Sometimes the stories mention hiding from monsters, other times from divine wrath. Always the same idea: underground is safety. These stories aren't unique to Turkey. In Northern Europe, there are tales of Fimbulwinter, a winter so long and cold it killed almost everyone. After Fimbulwinter, the old world ended and a new one began. Even in North America, some indigenous groups have stories about the long darkness, a time when the sun stopped shining and people hid wherever they could, sometimes in caves or deep in earth. When the sun finally returned, the world was changed. The pattern repeats: floods, darkness, endless winter, fire from the sky. People everywhere tried explaining what they saw. Sometimes those stories helped them survive. Imagine growing up with these kinds of stories. Your parents tell you about the time the sky went black for a year, when rivers ran backward, when earth shook and towns vanished. You'd believe disaster could strike at any time. You'd want to be ready. Maybe you'd start digging. Maybe a whole community would. Over generations, the stories would transform into action. Myths would become blueprints. Some researchers think that's why so many ancient cities have legends about the underworld. It wasn't just a place for the dead. It was a place to hide when the world above was too dangerous. There are even stories that seem to remember the construction itself. In some Turkish legends, people talk about cities below earth built by giants or ancient kings. Some say these cities were gifts from gods. Others say they were punishment, places to hide from divine anger. Myths aren't history, but they often hold kernels of truth. If the same stories appear in different places, maybe they're based on something real. Scholars call this cultural memory, the idea that stories can preserve things even when people forget details. A story about a great flood might start with a real river overflowing. Over time, the story grows. It becomes a myth about the world drowning. But it started with something people actually witnessed. Tales of darkness and endless winter might remember times when volcanoes erupted or weather broke for years. People might not know why it happened, but they remembered how it felt. That's why these stories matter. They help explain why people built places like Derinkuyu. If you believe disaster can strike any time, and you've heard stories about people surviving by going underground, you're more likely to do the same. Myths aren't just warnings. They're also instructions. They teach people what to do. When the sky turns black, go below. When the world floods, climb into a boat. When winter never ends, hide somewhere warm and safe. Ancient Mesopotamian clay tablets list instructions for surviving disasters. They discuss storing grain, collecting water, keeping animals close. Some mention safe houses or hidden places where people should gather during storms. In China, records from over 2,000 years ago describe yaodongs, dwellings dug into hillsides, safe from wind and weather. These weren't just homes. They were shelters for bad times. When we look at Derinkuyu, we're seeing the end result of thousands of years of fear, memory, and planning. Myths told people what was possible. Stories gave them ideas. Each generation added something new. Another room, another tunnel, another layer of protection. Myths can shape how people organize their entire lives. If your stories say the world might end, you make sure you're not caught unprepared. You keep extra food. You teach children how to find water. You build doors that only open from inside. All of this gets passed down. Over time, stories and buildings blend together. People remember the myth, but they live in the reality. Some myths talk about enemies, not just from sky or earth, but from other people. Sometimes the disaster is war. Sometimes invaders. The lines blur. Is the darkness from a volcano or from an army burning your fields? Is the flood from gods or from a broken dam? Myths mix everything together. That's why it's hard to know exactly what drove people underground. The stories mention floods, darkness, endless winter, and monsters. But they also describe enemies outside gates. Maybe the truth combines all these fears. What I find compelling about this mystery is how deeply stories shape real life. Myths aren't just old fairy tales. They're survival guides, reminders of what can go wrong and what people can do about it. When you look at Derinkuyu, try seeing both sides. The hard stone and the stories carved into memory. The engineering and the ancient fears. Every tunnel might respond to a real disaster. Or it might answer a story told around a fire late at night when wind howls outside. People have always tried making sense of the unknown, sometimes through science, sometimes through stories. Both paths lead to the same place, trying to survive, to protect what matters, to find hope even in darkest times. The underground cities of Cappadocia are proof that myths and memory working together can build something lasting, something that still stands thousands of years later. So what do we actually take from Derinkuyu? What does this underground city carved from volcanic stone tell us about ourselves? Step back and look at the larger picture. This place is more than a strange archaeological site. It's a mirror reflecting what humans do when the world becomes dangerous or unpredictable. Derinkuyu isn't only about fear. It's about what people do with fear. Some run, some freeze. But the people here dug in, literally. They transformed fear into planning, turned anxiety into stone walls and ingenious tunnels. That's not merely survival. That's creativity. That's converting a problem into a project. But there's still a massive mystery at the heart of this. We don't know exactly what forced them underground. There are theories: war, disaster, climate, disease. But we can't be certain. The city doesn't come with a plaque saying, "This is why we built this." Instead, it gives clues. Heavy doors, narrow passages, ventilation shafts, storage rooms. All these features point to one conclusion: people who expected trouble and wanted to be ready. Think about the work involved. Generations must have participated. Parents teaching children to carve stone. Elders sharing techniques for making tunnels safe. There were probably arguments. Some people wanted to stay above. Others pushed for more levels, deeper passages, additional wells. It takes trust to build something this massive together. And patience. You don't finish a city like this in a year or even a decade. It's a project that outlives its original builders. Why did they keep going? Why not stop at a few safe rooms? The answer might be simple. Once you start making a place safer, it's hard to stop. You improve the walls. Add another escape route. Create space for more food, more people. Over time, the city grows. It becomes more than a hiding place. It transforms into a second home, maybe even a primary home for some. Here's what's remarkable. The people behind Derinkuyu didn't have blueprints, modern tools, or adequate light. But they solved problems one by one. How to get water deep underground. How to let air in while keeping smoke and danger out. How to feed everyone, maintain cleanliness, organize daily life. Every detail represents a lesson in problem solving, preserved in stone. But there's another dimension. These underground cities show us how people respond when times get hard. They don't just surrender. They adapt. They construct new systems. Perhaps they even find new meaning. In dark times, the city likely became more than shelter. It was a place to rebuild trust, share stories, dream about better days. Look closely and you can see echoes of Derinkuyu in the world today. Not the stone tunnels, but the concept behind them. People everywhere build safe places. Sometimes physical, sometimes mental. Panic rooms, storm shelters, backup plans, secret reserves of food or money. Even community groups, support systems, and online spaces can function as a kind of underground city for the mind. When things get rough, we search for ways to feel safe. That urge is eternal. There's another lesson too. Just like in Derinkuyu, most of us don't face catastrophic threats daily. But we still plan. We still worry. We still construct routines and spaces to help us manage the unknown. Sometimes it's a real door you can lock. Sometimes it's just a habit or comforting ritual. The drive to prepare is built into us. But here's where it gets deeper. The people of Derinkuyu left behind more than tunnels. They left a blueprint for hope in dark times. They demonstrated that humans can create beauty and order even when the outside world is dangerous or chaotic. They brought art, music, and laughter into shadows. They found ways to keep faith alive even when they couldn't see the sun. That's the real legacy. Not just stone walls or secret passages, but proof that people can shape their world. No matter how difficult things become, they can make a home from rock, find community in tight spaces, pass on lessons to the next generation. What's the ultimate takeaway? Strip away the mystery, the legends, the elaborate theories, and you're left with something simple but powerful. People survive because they help each other. They think ahead. They build safety nets, both tangible and intangible. Even when forced underground, they don't abandon joy, culture, or hope. Maybe there's a lesson here for us too. We all face our own storms, sometimes external, sometimes internal. We can't carve tunnels or roll giant stone doors shut, but we can still build places of safety. We can plan, adapt, look out for each other. We can find meaning even in darkness. One final thought. Derinkuyu lasted for centuries. People came and went. Threats changed. The world outside evolved. But the city remained, ready for whatever came next. Maybe that's the point. We can't control everything, but we can prepare. We can hope. We can create something strong enough to last. Something that helps the next person or the next generation when their moment comes. So tonight, as you settle in, remember this. Deep under the ground, people once found a way to turn fear into hope and stone into shelter. They left behind more than tunnels. They left a message for all of us. Be ready. Be kind. Never let the darkness win. The doors are still there, waiting in the stone. The passages still twist through the earth. The wells still hold water. Derinkuyu endures, not as a monument to fear, but as a testament to human resilience. We built it. We survived it. We emerged from the darkness again and again. And we always will.